there's such epic emotions involved. Anyone that thinks that there's no fear and you can just sort of, I'm at peace with dying during those activities, no, that's not happening. The truth is a sheer, like, panic's probably not the word. It's just this level of fear. Incredible. You cling to anything.
Recently on Australian True Crime, we spoke to former New South Wales police member and author Craig Semple. Craig is now very focused on his work in the mental health space, especially as it pertains to policing. He told us about the shocking stabbing of his younger brother Jason in 1998, while Jason was trying to perform a routine arrest. And later he suggested we should talk to his brother about his long and varied policing career. So that's exactly what we're doing this week. In a special 2-part series, we hear from Jason Semple about his work with New South Wales Police and with the Australian Federal Police, as well as some private security in Iraq. This is Australian True Crime. We acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which this podcast is created, the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people of the Kulin Nation. And a warning, this episode of the podcast contains graphic descriptions of violence.
The reason I enjoy doing podcasts is like, it's actually a bit of an outlet. It's actually cathartic. You sort of bleed a little bit of pain, depending on what you're talking about. But for me, it's like if I can just get inside one or two young guys' heads and go, mate, the world is there waiting for you to take it, get on your adventure. And it doesn't, I said men.
No, I get it. That's right.
But like,
yeah,
anyone that's coming through the system, it's like, if I can sort of trigger you into chasing that adventure and really backing yourself, it's all worth it, so.
I think that might be part of our age. I think you and I are about the same vintage. And that is something that really is very present with me all the time now. And as I get older, like realising, oh, wow, you can do anything.
You can.
There's nothing holding you back but yourself. But did you always have that vibe, or is that coming to you as you get older?
No, I was pretty, because I was a middle child and everything, growing up. I don't know, life was like, you either got amongst it or you got left behind back when we were kids. And it was like, also, there was no reason why you wouldn't go, just go do whatever you got to do. So I think it was pretty intrinsic, and as we all discussed, like in this podcast, I found myself overseas, somewhere like the Philippines with their special action force. How is it that I'm in your jungle showing you how to operate in your jungle, which you grew up in? But then I realized that maybe I was sort of in training for what I ended up doing all through my childhood, because your parents let you go. You spent every minute of daylight doing whatever your thing was.
Outside, getting up to mischief.
Yeah. So, and it was always in the bush, or a lot of injuries over the time when you're a kid and doing stupid things. But I don't know, it made you very resilient as an adult.
You were a gung-ho kid, though. You're the kind of kid that most mothers pray they don't end up with, even though obviously you're a nice guy and you've grown up well. But I think, is it true you're in hospital a lot? You're just throwing yourself at shit as a kid.
Yeah. Well, my mum deserves a Nobel Peace Prize and probably a few other accolades. I would have been very difficult to manage as a kid. I was an ADHD poster child before anyone really got diagnosed with anything.
What struck me actually, listening to you talk about your childhood, your ADHD, the effect it had on how you approach school. I've heard you talk about knowing that you were this kid with all the potential, but frustrating for adults because they didn't know how to get you to engage with education and things like that. I thought, I've heard versions of this story from a lot of guys who ended up becoming offenders.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I could see that. You could see how that would, that trajectory would be enabled by those sort of, because you get treated like you're the bad kid.
Speaking to your brother, Craig, he was telling us that, you thought about going to the military or policing as a young bloke. You chose policing. He was in policing. And he came to regret encouraging you really early in your career. Obviously, that's a pivotal incident we'll get into. But again, just two gung-ho ideas. Like there was never a part of you that thought, I'll be a florist.
Yeah.
Like it was always one hectic thing or another, right?
Yeah, yeah. It had to be, I think I was just chasing stimulation, but also just a meaningful stimulation. For me, I would very quickly if I got to a point of comfort in whatever I was doing, then I found it uncomfortable because the challenge wasn't there to maintain the stimulus, which sort of kept me grounded.
Yeah. Do you have kids?
I got 5 kids between
Jesus.
myself and
Of course you do.
we're a blended we're like the Brady Bunch, but
Right.
without Alice or the butcher. So unfortunately,
Yeah.
if we had Alice, 5 kids, blended family, 3 dogs, no problem.
Yeah.
No Alice, problem. But they're a little bit older now, so.
Well, how does it work with parenting when you're such a gung-ho fella? How do you ever encourage your kids to be safe, hang back, relax a bit, chill out, you kids? You're driving me mad. How does that work?
Yeah, it's a very good question, actually. But they're pretty good. And to a large degree, maybe from a good point of view, the environment they grew up in is different to the one we did. Ours was really structured around do whatever you want, have your own adventure. So that's what we did. Whereas now, and I'm guilty of it as well, we've really constructed this boxed up sort of world that they live in. Oh, you can't be out, you can't be away from home. Where are you? I can't get you on the phone. All these sort of barriers and constructs that we've done, to our kids, sort of you can see that it's maybe diminished their adventure side a little bit comparative to us.
Their courage,
Yeah.
I think.
And courage, yeah.
I think they're pretty scared.
Yeah. It's definitely a do as you're told sort of generation, really.
Yeah, tell me what to do is the other side of that. Tell me what to do.
Yeah. I mean, they still get out and get amongst it. And they're very, I love the work ethic throughout our kids and their sense of decency, their compassion towards others, as, balanced against, I suppose, making sure people are doing the right thing in their spheres as well. So I'm very proud of the kids, actually, especially with the amount of time I was away from home. But I think some of the activities I was doing, they come back, my kids were around a lot of very special humans, so the guys I was working with, they're just this incredible people. I'm talking, guys from US Special Forces, British Special Forces, Australian Special Forces. Then you got all the special operations, law enforcement, CIA. All these guys were, especially when I was living in the UAE for that period embedded with their military. We just had these incredible humans. Those guys took time to sort of talk to the kids. And so I'm very grateful for that.
I never would have imagined that'd be a workplace that would feature family barbecues and hanging out with each other's families for some reason. I always imagine you go away, you hang out in the jungle, you do your business, and then you all split up and go back to your families. I never realised it was such a normal workplace in a way.
No, you are 100% correct with the operational world that I was living in, especially with the federal police. So you're literally, what you just said is exactly 100% correct. But when we come home, we saw enough of each other on deployments for long periods of time. I don't need to see them when I'm taking a month off after coming back home. That time was pretty much secured for the kids and making up for lost time with your family. And then we just sort of rotate back into the next deployment. But fast forward to when we're in the UAE, different, we weren't operational, with a couple of little trips in there that I didn't think would occur, but they did. Most of the time it was we had our work days over at military bases, and then Emiratis are massive on encouraging family time and not doing any work outside of work. They said, when you're off, you make sure you're with your family, and that's what we want you to be concentrating on. So they're actually very unique people, the Emiratis. It's very insightful in a few areas that maybe we could learn from over here as well.
And how fabulous for the kids to be exposed to other cultures like that as well, like immersed in other cultures.
Yeah, 100%. It's really good for them.
The event we have to discuss is a story that has been, it's legendary in crime fighting circles in Australia. And it's also an all-star story because, for example, your brother told me, that I met Gary Jubelin. The first time I ever met Jubes was at a hospital. My brother had been stabbed And Jubes was there in his capacity as a homicide detective to take his dying declaration.
Yeah.
That's you.
Yeah.
That's how much everyone assumed you weren't going to survive, was that homicide already took the file. Tell us about the event.
Yeah, I mean,
do you get sick of talking about this? Because it's like it happened so long ago and so much has happened in your life since then. You've achieved so much. Is it irritating when everyone goes, okay, yeah, but first, let's talk about that?
No, I don't get sick of talking about it because I want some positive messaging to come out of that incident. So, and realistically, I wouldn't say it was the bedrock for creating the human that I then wanted to be, but it definitely added to, I suppose, whatever genetic part of me that was going to push me down that direction. It definitely created a place where I could sort of build from especially psychologically and everything. But yeah, I mean, it's the first 2 weeks of being in the cops. It's like, I joked about this when we had our passing out parade. It was Friday the 13th, so 2 Fridays earlier. We're standing at the parade ground, looking all spiffy, families around, and I said to a few of the guys, is it just me, or is it a bit auspicious that today is Friday the 13th? Should we really be passing out on Friday the 13th? It's not. And it was like an innocuous joke at the time. But, 2 weeks later, I'm laying there in hospital thinking about that comment and going, wow, oh, well, at least I know, who that Friday the 13th was going to affect. Yeah. Unfortunately, it affected a few other people out of my class over the next few years. But yeah, so 2 weeks after passing out, making that comment, I'm on a 9 till 9 shift, so 9 a.m. till 9 p.m. with Brian Neville. He's my field training officer, being that I was brand new.
So they team you up, the recruits, with the older bloke, wouldn't they?
Yeah. When you're in your probationary period, which is first year, yeah, you're pretty much always on shift with the field training officer, or you should be. So yeah, I was working with Brian. We actually, in amongst our tasks, we drove Pete Forsyth from Glebe Police Station over to the airport because he was doing a juvenile prisoner run. So it's basically fly to some, it might be outback New South Wales, pick up the juvenile, take them to a court, maybe fly them back. Maybe they got remanded. That was his shift for the day, sort of flying around New South Wales, with a couple of juvenile criminals. He was super excited because I hadn't met him. I'd only met him that morning. And he's like, oh, I'm so pumped. It's great to have another real big guy, in uniform, because it's just the big guys in uniform are always nice to have around.
Yeah.
So yeah, he was really excited, and I really took to him straight away because it was like he was just like this very he had this infectious curiosity. Oh man, we have to have a beer. You guys finish at 9. Maybe we can have a beer tonight. I want to get to know Jace. So normally, between those sort of shifts with quick turnarounds, probably wouldn't have done it. But yeah, we'd organised to catch up with Pete. So we finished our shift. I was still in my uniform, so I had my full uniform on. Just had the T-shirt over the top, so it's like you'd have to be pretty much blind not to see that I was a cop.
Most criminals pride themselves on being able to pick a cop in plain clothes. So you're not even trying to really pull that off. Yeah,
they're pretty much as good as picking us as we are as picking them. Usually it's just the eyes that give everyone away. But yeah, so we went to Pete's house straight after that shift. I met Jackie and the kids, Brody and Mitchell, Ronnie, who I'm still in contact with.
These are Pete's family?
Pete's family, yeah. So Pete's wife and 2 kids. Brody would have been maybe 18 months old, toddler, and Mitch was probably about 3 at the time. So, we mingled and, said hello to Jackie, his wife, and then there was just a probably 450-metre stroll from his place to the Lord Wolseley Hotel, where we had a few beers. For the first time in a long time, I was trying to put on a persona of, okay, I'm very sensible. So I was drinking light beer, right, knowing that I had to drive a bit later.
Yeah.
And, we played pool, and Pete and I really connected very quickly to the point where we were both joining forces and, giving Brian a fair bit of a hard time at the time, typical police humour. When we left that pub, it was only about 11:30, but Pete was really keen to have one more beer. So there was another pub on an opposing corner, maybe a 300-metre walk. So we're on our way there, and that's when we came across a couple of young kids, and one of them incredulously, I tried to say, hey, you guys want to buy some drugs, some ecstasy or similar?
To you guys?
Yeah. And they directed the question to Pete. And so, Pete and Nifty, so Brian Neville, they were obviously far more experienced at policing. So I'm literally not even interacting. I'm just going to be there as a physical requirement if needed. And I'll watch, listen, and learn. So, they are interacting, ask a few questions. Turns out that the drugs are with, his cousin or similar across the road. Then that fellow who ended up being Murray Hearn, who's obviously the offender involved in the incident, he comes over. The boys start asking a few questions, and he realizes that, clearly realizes that we're police, right?
He got it, right.
Yeah.
If you'd like to talk to someone about abuse that's taken place in your life, no matter how long ago it happened, your GP is always a good place to start. If that's not going to work for you, you can contact 1-800-RESPECT on 1-800-737-732 or via their website 1800respect.org.au. Or you can call Lifeline's 24-hour phone counselling service on 13 11 14.
We positioned him into an alcove, which is basically the alcove of the building that also doubles up as a fire escape, so it's the width of 2 doors. He was down on his haunches, directed so. So we're asking, the boys were asking for ID. Eventually, Pete was getting a bit annoyed by the fact that he was playing in his bum bag. Barry, the offender, had a bum bag on, and he was sort of playing around in it, and it was just taking too long to do something that should take 1 second. So obviously there's a bit of concern about that. So it's the boys stood him up, and what he'd been doing at that time was actually prepping the Bowie knife, or, the folding knife, ready for action. He'd never had any intention of providing a form of ID. It was all about getting the knife ready. So as he stood up, it was at that point he sort of, words to the effect, well, I'm out of here, and went to push off. And as he's done so, if you can imagine, there's 3 of us facing this offender. I'm on the left-hand side, Pete's in the middle, and Brian's on the right-hand side as we're looking at that offender. As he goes to push off, I didn't use too much force, but I used enough to sort of direct my hand where his chest starts to meet his neck, but not in a form that would even cause any
You didn't choke him.
No, it was just no, you're not going.
Yeah, you just stopped him.
And just pushed him back. And it was at that time that he stabbed, actually, to this day, I don't know if he stabbed myself or Pete first, but I definitely, we're of the opinion it's probably me, because I was the one that actually was putting force on him back against the wall. So I felt 2 blows, one to my chest and one to my stomach. And I actually cognitively at the time thinking, I grew up in Newcastle. If that's the best you got, man, if that's a punch.
I've heard people say that before, that they thought it was a punch.
Yeah.
Or a poke even.
Yeah, I thought it was a punch. But I actually, in my brain I laughed, because I was thinking, if that's the most amount of kinetic force you can deliver, it's literally laughable. And then, then there was a bit of commotion. Yeah, this is all happening over seconds, This whole thing took about less than 10 seconds, right? But for me, it's broken down into milliseconds. It really is, that type of event, every millisecond you live, as opposed to normal day-to-day, you sort of just traverse through time. And at some point in that short period of time, Brian's yelled out, knife, knife, knife. I think he was completely aware that we were unaware that a knife had been produced. Unfortunately, at that point, both of us had been stabbed already. When Brian yelled that out, even though I've still got the offender sort of pushed up against the wall, and Pete's interacting, it was enough to trigger me to look down, and I could see blood, coming out of my shirt in a pretty significant way. to the point where I pulled my shirt up physically. It's like, as if it would have changed. You could just see you're bleeding. But I pulled my shirt up to have a look, and it actually sprayed out. So then I suppose the brain, it's like my body knew that I'd been stabbed before the cognitive part of my brain did. And once I'd visually seen it, then that connected the two. Obviously the body's response to like a severe injury, and then your brain's acknowledgement of it. So now the full thing, now you can go into shock, and which I probably did to a large degree. But and I looked up, put my hand on one of the stab wounds. It was bleeding the most, and yeah, it was just like this incredible moment of no way, I'm literally going to die. As soon as you see that, your brain goes into, oh my God, I'm literally going to die. So you go from being perfectly normal, having a perfectly relaxed evening, joking with someone, and next thing you know, you're standing there, blood spraying out of your body, and you're going, well, there's no way I can survive this. At that time, Brian has probably saved my life by pushing both Peter and I away from the offender. And then Brian is squared off against the offender, who's now threatening him with a knife. So he's the only one who hasn't been stabbed, but he's the only one that's actually, well, he's the first one to sort of catch on to the fact that there was even a knife involved.
It was happening.
Which is quite insane when you think about it. They square off, and the offender runs down towards the city with Brian in pursuit. So Brian's chasing him. Pete turns his attention to me, seeing the gravity of what's occurred. This is a guy that's been stabbed in the heart. So the knife went into his heart, and obviously there was a semi-extraction of the knife, so it's a double stab, but it didn't come out of his chest, if that makes sense. So the knife went into his heart, would have slid back, not come out of his chest, gone back in again. So there was 2 stab wounds in the heart. No real bleeding around where the knife had gone through his chest. So he, completely unaware.
So you're bleeding heavily, but he's not. He's been stabbed fatally, but doesn't realise, and he's not really bleeding.
It's literally, to this day, I'd struggle with it actually, because I felt incredibly guilty that I wasn't thinking about him at all, because for me, the way he was giving me assistance, it was like he's okay. Anyway, I'm basically on the side of the road, half in the gutter, half on the pathway, and I could see my blood travelling down the path and over the lip of the gutter and into the gutter. And I'm looking at that going, there is no way I'm surviving this.
That's a lot of blood, isn't it, to have the force to be running like a stream?
Yeah. And Pete, at that time too, Pete had said, let me have a look. So I took my hand off, and it was a mass ejection of blood, and he's pushed my hand back on. He goes, for fuck's sake, don't take your hand off again. Keep your hand on here, keep the pressure on. And then his last words to me, he goes, hey, you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. And then slumped onto me. So at that point, I've got an unconscious Pete on my chest, and our legs are sort of tangled. So he's laying almost intimately on my chest, his head's near my chin. And I thought, in the crazy moment when you're probably suffering from pretty significant shock yourself, I actually thought he fainted out all the blood, because why else would he do that? And I honestly, no comprehension that he'd been injured. At that point, Brian he has the option. He's chased that offender down to the end of the street where there's an intersection, and the offenders sort of headed towards George Street. Nifty looked up at us just before he kept pursuing him, realised we were both on the ground. So he made the choice then, we'll have to get old mate later. I need to go and see why both of those guys are on the deck. So he's an unsung hero, still in the police. Just an incredible dude when you think about it, what he's been through, and largely forgotten over the years as well. He sees his best mate, Pete Forsyth, laying on top of me unconscious. So he drags him off, and then obviously he's cognizant of the fact that Pete is in a very serious way, but he had a bit of blood on me at that stage, but a lot of that was transferable from me. So still no bleeding from Pete. It was very blood-free, extreme trauma that had occurred to him. In my periphery, I'm laying there just trying to calm myself and process what's occurring with me. It sounds very selfish, but you do become selfish in those moments where
Yeah, it doesn't sound selfish at all.
and
Do you have training, by the way? Like, is there at the academy?
Yeah.
Is this a moment where training kicks in, where you think that's right?
No.
I remember they said no.
No, it's if I was being brutally honest, we did a knife defense package, which really just the only effective part of it was like, we watch these videos of how quick someone can make distance and do extreme damage with a knife. That's probably the only benefit out of the training. They actually didn't really train you on how to defend yourself from it. It's pathetic.
Or how to triage injuries potentially.
How to triage those first aid side of things was back in those days was absolutely abhorrent. And think about it, I should have been at the peak of a trained officer because you've just come out of the academy.
Yeah, you've just graduated.
So yeah, unfortunately, you're on your own to a large degree. So yeah, I'm lying there in absolute sheer, like the gravity of the panic that goes through your body is like I can feel it now. You could pick it up with a forklift. It's like a real tangible, psychological entity. The saying where your life flashes before your eyes. A lot of people talk about that when they've been involved. My take on that is that it's like it does, but it's like your brain is a hard drive, and it's somewhere in that hard drive. It's searching, quick as it can. What do I do here? What options have I got?
And maybe can I relate this back to anything I've ever been through before?
Yeah.
Is there a clue there as to what I could do now?
Yeah, 100%. So my brain, it's very weird, but the night before, I'd been reading a book by Mick Drury.
Oh, Copper?
Yeah, Mick Drury, the Blue Murder series, shot in his kitchen as an undercover. In the book, the night before, I got to the chapter where clearly that was where he got shot, right? And I was thinking, do I read this chapter or I go to sleep? In the end, I go, my problem ADHD kicked in and I need to know now. So I read that chapter. That chapter probably saved my life, as weird as that is, because in that chapter, Mick Drury goes into quite some detail of what it was like getting shot twice with a .357 through his kitchen window. He's laying on the floor in his kitchen, like I was, bleeding to death. And he's thinking, well, there's nothing I can really do from a first aid perspective. What can I do? And his mind, he goes, I'm just going to keep myself calm. And if I can keep myself calm, then maybe I won't bleed as much and maybe I won't go in the shock and maybe I'll survive this. Probably saved his life. I don't know where he got that inkling from, but I thank him for sharing it in his book.
Wow.
As I'm laying on the street and like I said, you're in this sort of microcosm and I'm watching my blood, go over the gutter. So my brain did the hard drive search and it centered on Mick Drury and what he did. So I was so intent on keeping calm. People come up to me and try to comfort me. And I was telling them to fuck off. So there was a security guard there. He goes, mate, you're going to be okay, mate. You're going to be okay. But because he was talking to me, it was interrupting my concentration on remaining calm. So I'd just say, can you fuck off? It sounds really bad, but I just wanted to go into my shell and do the one thing that I've chosen. This will help me. The duty officer from the city central that turned up is like going, go get that guy's details and get a statement of him because he is going to die. Because I lost 4.9 litres of blood.
And a dying declaration can be entered into evidence, can't it? It's a very effective witness statement in a situation like this. So that's what they were thinking as coppers. That's what Jubes was thinking later.
The guilt that comes with Pete and what had happened to him at the same time, I was so intent on just surviving, lives me to this day. And it's not I don't sit here and suck on my thumb and look at it in a negative way. It's just one of those naturally a survivor guilt side of things.
Well, it's like your brother's guilt about, I was the one who encouraged him into the coppers and then he got stabbed 2 weeks later. So, yeah, we know it's not rational, but it's emotional. There's only so much control we can have over it, right?
Yeah. When I got to the hospital, and keep in mind every aspect of that trip from when, because the first Here's the other thing, that I wouldn't be here if Vi McGilchrist and her paramedic partner hadn't decided to catch up for coffees with another crew that night. So they just literally 90 seconds around the corner, on a busy Friday night, and it had been raining. So, they're always busy. So they're Johnny on the spot. But what really freaked me out is when the first vehicle turned up, they went and they pulled Peter aside and they were working on Pete. And I was like going, hello, I'm bleeding to death. Mr. Selfish over here, because I'm totally oblivious to what had happened to Pete. You would think I would be able to work it out, but no, probably a bit too much going on. Eventually, it was probably 20 seconds later, the other crew come and Vi McGilchrist, so they started working on me. It's very traumatizing because it's brutal. You get dragged by your feet along the roadway so they can start working on you. I'm talking on bitumen, and they start doing their stuff, and then it's trying to stabilize you, get you in the ambulance. So even when we're in the ambulance, I could hear Vi saying to her partner, because she had to stay in the back, no, you take the next left. You should have taken this one. And I'm here going, hey, I was the worst patient in history. I was like going, hey. And then I'm saying to her, hey, how serious is this? Because if I'm going to die, I'd rather get your phone out now. She goes, no, you'll be okay. You're going to be okay. And I go, I'm used to hearing people say that. No, tell me the truth. And she goes, no, you're going to be, but it's like, you can never really share with a patient, you're going to die. She doesn't know that. She's trying to keep me encouraged.
Did you, when you said get your phone out, did you want to ring your mum or?
I don't know who I wanted to ring, but yeah, probably someone. Just you just wanted to talk to someone in your world and just go, hey, if I don't know, even know what would you say? It's ridiculous. But once we got into hospital, RPA, amazing people there. Just so happens that one of the best surgeons for abdominal injuries had been doing some training there that day, so he's still there. So a lot of things worked in my favour. I had the full attention of the entire emergency department, as you'd imagine. And I asked about Pete about 3 or 4 times. And I think if you'd been in a more of a calm mindset, you would have realised, hey, there's something really wrong because no one's answering this question. Most of the time it's like, yeah, he's fine. And I go, well, I just saw him before. He wasn't fine. Yeah, I suppose they were just interested in not upsetting me because he's dead. He pretty much he died on top of me. The rest of it was just trying to revive him. So, it's just, I found it terrifying being in the hospital. I was watching the machine with your heart rate and your blood pressure. And I found if I looked away from it, it would escalate ridiculously. But if I looked at it, I could actually, semi-control how much stress I just use it as a bit of a concentration point.
But it shows how precarious you were, doesn't it? That it could oscillate like that.
Yeah. And just the sheer volume of people that were running around with, you can see concern in people's faces. So, as a victim, you're trying to read everyone to see whether he looks relaxed, maybe I'll be okay. Or he looks very concerned, maybe I'm going to die. So you're just looking for anywhere where you can find something to grab hold of and enhance your hope. I was hyper sensitive to every conversation. Occasionally I'd ask someone because someone would say something and I go, what's he mean by that? And in pretty quick order, I found myself up in the operating theatre. And I think my surgeon was quite shocked because the last thing I said before, they put me under was, hey, I'll buy everyone a beer if you don't fuck this up. Yeah. And then I woke up in the morning and just literally, or the next day from the surgery. And the other point of guilt was that moment because I felt such elation waking up. Like it was just like, oh, I didn't die. It's very hard to quantify actually. There's such epic emotions involved. The fear factor. Anyone that thinks that there's no fear and you can just sort of, I'm at peace with dying, during those activities, no, that's not happening. The truth is a sheer, like, panic's probably not the word. It's just this level of fear.
I think it's our survival instinct, don't you think?
100%.
I think that people say things all the time like, oh, if that happened to me, I'd rather die. If I got that old, I couldn't do something or other, I'd rather die. But then when you spend time with people who are close to death, their survival instinct is so strong.
Very, yeah, incredible. You cling to anything.
Yeah.
You know, so waking up was, I was so elated, and I probably still, you know, I've got morphine, so you've obviously got a bit of uplift from those type of painkillers as well. And then, you know, a couple of hours later, that elation turned into a level of grief that I can't explain either, because I became aware that Pete had died, and here I am, so happy, like I'd won the lottery, and he didn't, you know. So then I had to sort of balance my elation at being alive against the fact that someone else with kids wasn't. So yeah, it was very confronting.
Yeah, it's insane. I mean, it's like the push and pull on your nervous system in the space of that 24 hours is something most humans will never experience. Like it's unbelievable. What were your actual injuries from the stabbing?
So there's 2 stab wounds. The top one was directly above my heart. So the ribs did their job there, and the actual knife split one of the ribs, chipped it. So the rib did its job. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. The main, obviously, injury was the one in my abdomen, which went through my stomach, an artery that feeds my stomach, a little bit of the bowel, and straight through my liver.
Oh.
So you're talking the perfect storm of bleed. So it's just you're going to bleed to death.
Bleed, infection, all of those things. Yeah. God.
Yeah. So, and that was some of the things that I wasn't made aware of until you're sort of out of the woods. But there was the infection, so I could still easily kill you. So you have that euphoria of waking up going, I'm here. And I actually remember Alan McQueen when he got killed, you know, because it was just as I was joining. And I was thinking, oh, shit, you know, this guy's got killed. Should I be joining the cops? This could happen to me.
Yep.
And he survived. So he had a couple of days of, I survived this, and then died from infection. So, you know, there's that side of it. I didn't really zero in on it, but the doctors were very concerned about it. But they sort of shielded me from that stress, I suppose.
To some degree, but 3 months later you were back at work. So it's not like you were wrapped in cotton wool.
No.
What I also find fascinating is that I think most people would take all of that entire event for many reasons and call it a day when it comes to policing. You know, you're obviously a bit superstitious because you thought about the 13th of Friday the 13th and all those things. Like, surely most people would go, okay, I think I'm too traumatized. I could never go back to policing, or maybe that's a sign I shouldn't be in policing, or what, for many, many reasons, right? But you, according to many people, took that and turned yourself into a sort of invincible copper.
Yeah.
After that. And you said earlier a minute ago that you don't think it was really the biggest factor in who you became, but I can tell you your brother thinks it's a pretty big factor.
Yeah. It definitely, I think intrinsically I had certain protective elements in my psychology from when I was a kid. You know, you know, if my pop was around, he'd be the first one to say, you know, since I was 6 years old, I'm dictating terms. You don't go me and my sister, you know, in a sandpit when you're a kid, you know. And he's like going, man, you're picking on kids that are 4 or 5 years older than you. I said, well, no, they're bullies. And so I think that moment in the police, you know, getting stabbed sort of solidified that. And I don't know, my childhood was all around, I got injured all the time because you're always doing crazy stuff and with your mates were very active. And I think it's just sort of, okay, this sucks, but I'll recover from it and just, you know, I don't think I really knew anything different. It's like you just got to keep putting one foot in front of the other and keep moving forward.
And speaking of your pop, you grew up with some very heroic role models, didn't you? Your grandfather and his father were war veterans. I believe your great-grandfather was present not only at Gallipoli, but also at the Somme in World War I.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. He got shot at both
Wow.
Yeah.
So when you're growing up on these yarns, do you think that affected your perspective on, what it is to be a man, what it is to be brave?
Yeah, 100%.
All those things?
Yeah, my pop
Yeah.
was this stoic, gigantic man, but super compassionate. So he had this balance of strength and compassion, wisdom. One of the things I like as well is he really encouraging curiosity in your day-to-day. So, I think it's having a curious mind and being compassionate is like, if you've got those sort of squared away, you cannot not be a good human.
I think I've just discovered, by the way, the secret to your irresistibility to other men. I think this is where these man crushes are coming from, because you are physically impressive. You are, very capable in all these things. You're literally a policeman and a soldier. But you also are very upfront with this compassionate, vulnerable side of yourself. Even at the cafe, you've displayed that straight off the bat.
Yeah.
You're kind.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of men struggle to be both or find a balance between the two. And I don't mean that as a criticism on men. I think it's hard in our culture to present both.
Yeah, I think one of the key things that I learned from Pop, which maybe makes me approachable, is the fact that, I love interacting with people as well. Maybe that's been reduced a fair bit by the cops because you do, I don't know, there's a part of me that's sort of a little bit antisocial compared to what I used to be, but it's not. It's just like I'm very choosy who I invest time in.
You have a lot of difficult interactions, and a lot of people are going to have an attitude about you before you open your mouth and all that. So, yeah, it's reasonable.
Pop taught authenticity, compassion, and pretty much ego has no place in your personality. You should not have an ego. It's so toxic. And, some of the specialist areas that I worked in over the years, egos can get a bit out of control. And I'm quite happy to say, someone goes, oh, wow, I haven't done what you've done. And I go, stop right there. I haven't done what you've done either. And there's a reason for that. But don't diminish what you've done. You can't compare horses for courses, you know what I mean? It's not that exciting, really. Everyone's got their own heroic moments and moments of good deeds and all that sort of stuff.
Maybe it was that really positive role modelling that made the difference between your path and, as we said earlier, a lot of men, in particular of our generation, who had learning difficulties ended up on negative paths. Maybe it was that intervention of the positive role modelling from your pop.
Yeah.
Your great granddad and that.
Yeah. I 100% agree. And we've actually had this discussion because a lot of the time, especially when I was doing the tactical work, we're sitting off waiting to do a job, but sometimes we're sitting in these covert vans for 10, 12 hours, so a lot of stuff gets discussed by guys that you probably wouldn't expect to be having SWAT guys or special operations guys talking about. But, that's definitely a side that we would talk about as well. And yeah, there's some very insightful, free-thinking guys in those units.
Yeah, I've noticed that too, actually. Some sort of spiritual, they're a lot more three-dimensional than I think we realise, some of these blokes.
Yeah. So I got stabbed. It took me about maybe 3 months, 2 to 3 months. I was back at work, which is pretty silly in the scheme of things. In light duties, that type of surgery and the actual surgery takes far more recovery time than the actual injuries. Probably back on full duties within maybe 4 to 5 months. So wearing a gun, going out doing police work.
And how much support was there psychologically? Like, as you just said, wearing a gun 5 months after you've been very nearly fatally stabbed. Was there any concern that you might freak out if something happened? Most of us would. Most of us would think, oh, should I be carrying a gun when I'm had this terrible thing happen to me out of the blue, in the street?
Yeah.
That sounds like a recipe for disaster to me.
Yeah. Looking back, I mean, I survived the whole thing, but there were periods within that, especially that next 2 years, where I did come unstuck a fair bit. So, it was probably surviving that next 2 years was another aspect. But so in terms of support, New South Wales Police, sent me pretty much as soon as I could to a psychiatrist called Murray Wright. And I was so resistant to it because psychology and psychiatric help back in those days, that was like taboo.
Weak.
Yeah, it's like nothing good about going and seeing a psych. Anyway, Murray Wright was such an amazing dude. Somehow he managed to get me to go climb past my things that would, because I was putting barriers up. I don't have this. I don't have critical stress. They didn't even call it PTSD then. It was like critical stress syndrome or similar. So he was amazing. He helped me to sort of acknowledge that I was struggling. I did have a couple of pretty significant incidents drinking, over the next 12 to 18 months, which put me back in his office. And, we both acknowledged that I'd dropped the ball and what do we need to do, to get me back on track, and why are you drinking so much? Why are you using that as a crutch? So yeah, I suppose I didn't come out of it completely unscathed. And that's, going back to what you're alluding to in terms of care, I think if New South Wales Police hadn't put me in front of Murray like they did in the context they did, I probably wouldn't have been able to get through it by myself, even though I thought I could.
It's awesome to hear a success story, to be honest. It's great to hear. Unfortunately, we tend to hear people saying, I got no support.
Yeah.
So it's really great to hear that.
Yeah. And I'll share something with you. I have not shared on there's only probably a handful of people. Father Barry, who's like the police chaplain at the time, I shared it with him. But one of the nights, it was only 6 months after I physically recovered. So I was back at work and I was back doing policing, right? And as we had a tendency to do, we'd come back to the police station, we've had a big night, and hopefully the car crews weren't too busy and, hey, can you give us a lift home so you don't have to spend money on a taxi? So there's a few of us back at Annandale Police Station on this particular night. We all drank heavily, as a natural sort of part of the job. And I was obviously just trying to escape probably some of the pain that I was overlooking. But it's really weird. Like, I survived. So why should I be? I couldn't understand why I was still feeling this angst in my soul. I don't have a survivor's guilt, because you would do anything you could to survive. And here I was feeling upset that I'd survived 6 months later. What is this? What is this going on with my brain? Back in those days, like the keys to the gun safe were just sort of hanging on a hook, inside the thing. So I basically got the keys to the gun safe, walked in. Our gun safe back at Annandale, it was in a sort of another room, and there was two gun safes, and there's a mirror between the two doors that open up. Everyone's pistols are there. And you've got your own key for your handgun, which is on the peg, but it's back in those days, it was a revolver. And it goes on the peg fully loaded. Anyway, I didn't have any suicidal tendencies, and I still to this day, it's just not something I would ever do. And I don't say this making other people that have done this to be weaker. It's just I've a very strict set of rules in my brain as to why, and I can explain what those are later. But it's like I was almost possessed by some feeling of grief, and what would it be like just to get rid of this pain that I didn't even really know I was suffering from, because you're not sitting there thinking about it at those times. I got my gun off the peg, put it against my head, and I was looking in the mirror, and I pulled the trigger. This is keep in context that I'd probably had 10 or 12 plus beers, schooners of beer, so you're intoxicated, and I was watching the hammer on this gun go all the way back to its furthest. I wonder how much further it would go, 1 millimeter, 2 millimeter. But the downside is when that disengaged, that's it, you're dead. And I squeezed it a few times, just going, oh, what would it be like? But you can understand how you could have accidentally killed yourself. And as quickly as I'd done that, I would put it back on the hook, locked it, shut the door, locked it, put the keys back, went back into the room, which had about 12 cops, the night shift plus a few of us that have been having beers, and had a coffee, and then got a lift home like nothing happened.
Thank you to our guest today, Jason Semple. If you need support after listening to this podcast, you can call Lifeline on 13 11 14 or contact 1800 RESPECT on 1800 737 732 or 1800respect.org.au. Indigenous Australians can contact 13 Yarn on 13 92 76 or 13yarn.org.au.
The producers of this podcast recognise the traditional owners of the land on which it's recorded. They pay respect to the Aboriginal elders past, present and those emerging.